Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk about the hearing that happened yesterday in the case against Bryan Kohberger. Now, I know there's a hearing going on right now, but I wanted to jump on here and talk a little bit about what I took away from yesterday's hearing. Now, first of all, I want to say that I don't know if this is popular opinion or not, but I do like this judge. I feel like Judge Hippler is very direct. I feel like he has control of this courtroom and he challenged both the defense and the prosecution. So I do feel like he's fair. He's very dry. He doesn't have a lot of personality, but I don't want to party with him. I just want to see a fair trial. So let's talk about what I gathered from yesterday's hearing. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that Ann Taylor looked weak yesterday. And in my opinion, it's not so much that she looked weak as much as it's that it's a very challenging argument. You know, she's arguing that law enforcement didn't get warrants when it came to certain parts of the IGG. And I think that she knows that this is a gamble, but she's got to try it. You know, she has to try everything. She has a client who's looking at the death penalty. So, in my opinion, in order for Ann Taylor to defend her client, she has to make some of these arguments that may not work, but she has to try. Now, do I think that Ann Taylor is wrong in presenting this information? Absolutely not. In my opinion, what the feds did with this IGG was sketchy. If it doesn't violate Bryan Kohberger's constitutional rights, in my opinion, it does violate the rights of his ancestors. Now, I feel like if the feds did something that they weren't supposed to do, if they were looking in places where they weren't supposed to be looking, then the ancestors of Bryan Kohberger should be very, very upset. You know, some of these people may have given their DNA to find out about their lineage and, you know, create a family tree, and they may have opted out of allowing law enforcement to look at their personal information. Now, if law enforcement did it anyway, then that's a big problem. You know, just because law enforcement is investigating a case doesn't mean that they should be allowed to just, you know, overlook people's constitutional rights to privacy. In my opinion, this is why people don't trust law enforcement, because they do shady things like this sometimes, and then they try to hide it. You know, if you notice, the prosecution has not wanted to talk about this IGG. They have not wanted to address anything about this IGG. And a lot of people have said, well, they don't want to give up their investigative techniques. And I understand that part of it. But if their investigative techniques involve violating people's rights, then I think that's a major problem. In my opinion, it's something that needs to be looked into. If the feds did something shady in their investigation, and then the prosecution is trying to hide what they did by trying to sweep the IGG under the rug. And we know that that's what they've been trying to do. They made it very clear from the very beginning that they weren't going to be using this IGG. They wanted that understood in court that they were not going to be using the IGG. So is that to protect the wrongdoings of investigators who were looking into this IGG? Because if that's the case, that's another problem. You know, basically, if they knowingly broke the rules and then the prosecution is trying to cover for that, that's a problem. Now, this isn't the FBI's first rodeo, and I found the information about how they collected the garbage from Bryan Kohberger's house very interesting. You know, the FBI did not go and collect this garbage from Bryan Kohberger's house. What they did was they got with the garbage collection company and they waited until the Kohbergers put their trash out on the curb in the designated area where garbage is supposed to be picked up. And then what happened was the garbage company picked up the garbage from the designated area where it was supposed to be picked up. And once they did that, it became their property. And then they gave it to investigators. So that was pretty slick. They didn't really have to go in and get the garbage themselves. They used the garbage collection company to do it for them. And in my opinion, there's nothing really wrong with that. You know, once it becomes the garbage collection company's property, then they can do whatever they want with it. And if they want to give it to investigators, they can. So, like I said, I thought that was pretty slick. But let's talk about something that Ann Taylor was arguing. And that is that investigators didn't have warrants for the DNA. Ann Taylor was basically talking about the fact that there wasn't a warrant when investigators pulled the DNA off of the knife sheath. So that was kind of confusing to me because I'm not an attorney, but it seems like, obviously, it seems like to me that everything that's inside of a crime scene would obviously be fair game. I mean, it's a crime scene. So it seems as though everything within that crime scene would be fair game for investigators to collect. So I didn't really understand the argument that Ann Taylor was making as far as investigators collecting the DNA from the knife sheath. I mean, the knife sheath was part of the crime scene. I also thought that it was very interesting when Ann Taylor was talking about Dylan Mortenson's statements to investigators about what she heard and what she saw that night. Because according to Ann Taylor, Dylan Mortenson seemed to be very confused about what she was seeing, or at least confused about whether what she was seeing was real or not. You know, she mentions that Dylan Mortenson was intoxicated and that she didn't know if it was a dream or if she was really seeing what she thought she was seeing. You know, we know that Dylan and Bethany were texting. We know that law enforcement used these texts to create a timeline, or at least to help in constructing the timeline. So I thought that was very interesting that Dylan Mortenson wasn't really in a sober frame of mind, which I think that we all kind of assumed that everyone in this house had been drinking that night. But I thought that was very interesting that Dylan seemed confused about what she witnessed. Because in my opinion, if she was confused about what she witnessed, then maybe she did hear these crimes happening. Maybe she heard everything and just didn't realize if it was real or not. You know, we've talked a lot about the noise inside this house that would be happening as, you know, these crimes were being committed. And a lot of people have said that that Dylan and Bethany didn't hear anything. But after yesterday, I don't believe that. I believe that these two roommates heard everything that was going on inside that house. That was why they were texting each other. That's how they constructed the timeline. So I thought it was very interesting because if Dylan Mortenson thought that she might be hallucinating or that what she was seeing was not real, that she might be dreaming, then it's very possible that she heard the entire crime being committed and just didn't believe that it was real. So we learned a lot about what Dylan Mortensen told investigators. And we also kind of learned a little bit about the uncertainty of her statements. You know, the prosecution knew that she had said this, that she wasn't really sure. You know, she was confused about what she had seen, but they still used her description in the PCA. Now, the prosecution maintains that Dylan Mortensen did not change her story when it came to the description. She told investigators that this individual was taller than her, and allegedly she's 5'8". She told investigators that this person was wearing a full mask and that all she could see was his eyes and obviously his eyebrows. She could tell that he was a white male, and as the prosecution described it, that he was slim and that he was lean. So the prosecution does maintain that Dylan Mortensen never changed her description in any of the statements that she made to investigators, and that's why they included that in the PCA. According to Ann Taylor, Dylan Mortensen told investigators that she heard one of the victims run up the stairs, and then she also heard one of the victims run down the stairs, which Ann Taylor pointed out that really wouldn't make sense because the victims' lives were taken upstairs. So a victim wouldn't have come down those stairs. And Ann Taylor points that out. Now, Dylan also says that she thought that she heard someone crying in the bathroom. Now, we've heard this. We've heard that Dylan Mortensen may have heard someone crying. But I think this is the first time that we've heard that she believed that it was someone who was in the bathroom. So this crying wasn't necessarily coming from Xana's bedroom. So it's also very possible that Dylan was just not in her right frame of mind. Maybe it wasn't just alcohol. Maybe she had also used substances. Now, we don't know that, but I think it's a possibility. If she felt like she might be imagining all of these things that she's seeing, to me, that sounds like a little more than just being intoxicated. You know, maybe she wasn't in reality. Maybe she was on substances. And I'm not judging Dylan. I mean, these are college students, you know. They use substances. They experiment. They party. So I'm not judging Dylan for this. I mean, this is a lot of college students all across the country. So it's not just Dylan. And I'm not judging Dylan by that. You know, actually, it would make more sense to me if Dylan was possibly on substances and wasn't believing what she was hearing. You know, maybe she thought that it was because of whatever she was on and that what she was hearing wasn't real. That would make more sense to me than going into a frozen shock phase and not calling 911 for 8 hours. It would make more sense to me that Dylan might not have believed what she was hearing and just decided to stay in her bedroom. To me, that would make more sense. It would also make more sense to me that Dylan might not want to say, you know, that she was under the influence of anything to law enforcement out of fear that she may get in trouble. It also makes me wonder how accurate her description was. You know, if she was that intoxicated and didn't know whether what she was seeing or hearing was real, thought that maybe she was possibly dreaming, then how accurate was her description? How accurate is her account of what happened that night? I mean, the only reason that they have accurate times, in my opinion, is because they were texting, because her and Bethany were texting. Because I think that if Dylan was intoxicated to that degree, or possibly on substances, then she wouldn't even know accurate times. So I believe that that's where the texting comes in, because at least then they can document the time. We know that investigators didn't include all of Bethany and Dylan's statements in the PCA, and that would make sense. But after yesterday, I do feel as though they both heard everything that was going on inside that house that night. Something else that I thought was interesting was that Ann Taylor said that Murphy, Kaylee's dog, was inside of a bedroom that was opened. So Murphy was inside a bedroom where the door was opened. So how did Murphy not have any body fluid on him? How did he not venture out into the house and get into the crime scene? Unless it's very possible that maybe he was in a kennel. Maybe he was in a kennel and the bedroom door was opened. But I thought that was interesting that he wasn't locked inside of a bedroom. I also thought it was interesting that Ann Taylor mentioned that there was a dog that was barking for like 25 to 30 minutes. So we don't hear a lot of this. And so yesterday was kind of the first time that we had really heard this information about Murphy. We also heard about a bloody handprint that was on the handrail of the staircase. Allegedly, it was a male handprint, and it was made up of body fluid. They also brought up the shoe print that was inside Dylan's bedroom doorway. That was also made up of body fluid, and it appeared that someone had tried to clean that up, as well as a glove outside that was found outside of the King Roadhouse that also had body fluid on it. So who did all of this body fluid belong to? So a lot of people are saying that Ann Taylor looked weak yesterday when she was making her arguments. And I would agree that it looked like she was struggling a little bit. But a lot of that, in my opinion, is because it's a very tough argument for her to make. Now, she's going to make this argument because she's going to represent Bryan Kohberger to the fullest. But I think that the reason that she was struggling is because it is a tough argument to make. It's tough to argue that investigators would need a warrant to collect DNA from a crime scene. But I do feel as though she's making that effort. She's trying to go above and beyond for her client who's facing the death penalty. Now, on the other side, on the prosecution, in my opinion, Jennings is a horrible, horrible actress. She doesn't come across as being genuine to me. And yesterday, she almost talked herself into a Franks hearing. Judge Hippler basically had to stop her from going down that road. So, although I believe that both sides struggled, I feel like we got a lot of information out of yesterday's hearing. I feel like Judge Hippler, he has control of this courtroom, and he's moving things along, which is refreshing to see after watching Judge, just kind of let whatever go on in his courtroom. So it is refreshing to see Judge Hippler having control over this courtroom and getting things going. Things are moving along. He's asking questions. They're making arguments. He's challenging their arguments. So we learned a lot in yesterday's hearing, and I expect that we'll learn a lot in today's hearing. We have Brett Payne and Detective Mowry both taking the stand today. So I expect to hear a lot of I don't recalls and I don't remember and I believe so, but we'll see. They seem to forget a lot when they get on the stand, which seems odd because this is the biggest case in both of their careers. And it seems like they don't really remember a whole lot that happened during that investigation. But we'll see. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. I hope that y'all had an amazing day. We'll see you next time.